What if I told you the biggest rock band on the planet released 2 albums on the same day, went on a 2.5 year tour, and ended up losing money? Fired their drummer for being too high while they were all high, the lead singer incited multiple riots, and the rhythm guitarist just disappeared. Here's how Guns N' Roses built a monument to excess that ultimately destroyed them.
Like, subscribe, thank you.
So Guns N' Roses were riding high, but already there were cracks in the foundation. It's 1989, they're the biggest, most dangerous band in the world off the back of one album, Appetite for Destruction. Their label, Geffen Records, is breathing down their necks for a follow-up, but the band is a complete mess. Their guitarist, Slash, has a serious heroin habit. Their bassist, Duff McKagan, is chugging a gallon of vodka a day just to function. And the drummer, Steven Adler, is pretty much taking anything and everything that's a substance, up or down, and chasing it down. Meanwhile, the rhythm guitarist, Izzy Stradlin, the quiet one, he's gotten clean and now he can't stand to be in the same room as his bandmates. And then there's Axl Rose, the front man, a guy who operates on his own time, in his own universe, wrestling with a legion of personal demons. So they decide to get together to write the next record. They book 8 weeks in Chicago, a spot Axl and Izzy picked. Except for most of these 8 weeks, Axl and Izzy don't even show up. Slash later called it a total waste of time, a whole lot of nothing that produced maybe a handful of songs like Garden of Eden, Civil War. The band was fracturing before they even laid down a single track for the new album. And the whole operation was just scattered. Izzy, now sober, starts mailing his riff ideas to the band on cassette tapes because being around the collective addictions was just too much. This is how a lot of his parts for the new record get written. Not in a room together, but through the postal service. Despite the chaos, there's this one single night in the spring of 1990 at Slash's house in the Hollywood Hills. For a few hours, it was just like the old days. They were a band again. And in that one session, they managed to bang out ideas for something like 36 songs. It was the only moment during this whole disastrous period that Slash said felt like they were actually a band. They had the material, a mountain of it, but the foundation was already cracked. Axl decided they needed a keyboard player to flesh out the sound for the big epic ballads he had in his head. Songs like November Rain that he'd been tinkering with since before Guns N' Roses even existed. The rest of the band hated the idea, but Axl got what he wanted. And so he brings in this guy, Dizzy Reed. And to some, this was the first sign of the bloat, the moment the lean, mean, street fighting machine started getting soft in the middle. With Dizzy in the fold, they finally enter the studio with Mike Klink, same producer who did Appetite for Destruction. And the first real casualty of the sessions is Steven Adler. His drug use was so bad that he couldn't even play. They were trying to record Civil War, pretty straightforward rock song, and Adler just couldn't nail the take. Slash and Duff, who were by no means sober themselves, were getting pissed off. They kept telling him he was too messed up. It took something like 30 takes for Klink to piece together a usable drum track for that one song. The final straw came in July 1990. The band's lawyer had drafted this document saying if he didn't clean up, he was out, hoping it would scare him straight. And it did not. So he was out. There's this persistent rumor that Axl's wife at the time, Erin Everly, had overdosed at Adler's house, and Axl blamed him. Adler always denied it, saying he was the one who saved her life by getting her to the hospital. Whatever the truth is, Adler was gone. He later sued the band, got a couple $1 million, but the groove, that unique swing that he brought to the group, gone forever. So they needed a new drummer, so they get Matt Sorum from The Cult. Sorum's a powerhouse, technically perfect drummer, just doesn't have Adler's feel. Izzy and Duff in particular felt the change immediately. The band's whole identity shifted. First thing they recorded was Sorum as a cover of Bob Dylan's Knockin' on Heaven's Door for the Days of Thunder soundtrack. And it's big and slick, sounds nothing like Appetite for Destruction. With Sorum in place, they go back in the studio and start laying down basic tracks for the 30-plus songs they have. They reportedly knock out the basic structures for 36 songs in 36 days. It's the period after that where things start going completely off the rails. This is the era of overdubs, of Axl and Slash essentially taking over the entire project. Slash, who loved the indulgence, would layer dozens of guitar tracks on every song. He had this massive collection of guitars, and he used all of them, reveling in what he called a gluttonous guitar experience. But Axl took it to another level. He would spend months, literally months in the studio just working on his vocals and synthesizer parts. He'd rewrite lyrics on the fly, tinker with every single syllable, layering his voice over and over again. He was chasing some kind of perfection that only he could hear. During this time, the studio became Axl's kingdom. The other band members were rarely there. Izzy was basically a ghost, his contributions mostly lifted from the demos he had mailed in. Duff was lost in a fog of alcohol. The sessions became known as the Slash and Axl Show. They brought in guest musicians. Axl's friend from Indiana, Shannon Hoon, the singer of Blind Melon, sang backup on a bunch of tracks, including Don't Cry, where Axl actually gave him a co-lead vocal credit. Alice Cooper came in to do a part on The Garden. Michael Monroe from Hanoi Rocks played sax and harmonica on Bad Obsession. And the project was ballooning into this massive, sprawling epic. One of the last songs to be finished was November Rain. Axl had been working on this thing for nearly a decade. There are stories of an 18-minute version existing years earlier. Slash and Duff weren't even sure they wanted this 9-minute piano ballad on the album. It was so far from their hard rock roots. Matt Sorum, the new drummer, took his inspiration for the drum part from Elton John's Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, which is why it has all those dramatic, repeating fills. But the record label, Geffen, they were getting desperate. They had a blockbuster band and no product to sell. David Geffen was apparently planning on selling the company, and he wanted this album out there to boost the sale price. The band's initial idea was to release all 35 or 36 songs as a massive 4-disc box set. Geffen said, "Screw that," saying that'll never sell. So they settled on the plan to release 2 separate double albums on the same day. Use Your Illusion 1 and Use Your Illusion 2. Pretty ballsy move, huge middle finger to convention, but also a brilliant marketing stroke. And just when everybody thought the albums were finally done, mixed, and ready to go in the summer of '91, Axl threw another wrench into the works. Without telling anybody else in the band, he tacked on a final song to Use Your Illusion 2. It was this wild, bizarre, industrial tinge track called My World. He apparently wrote and recorded it in a few hours after a friend slipped him some mushrooms. And it does sound like it. When the other guys heard it on the finished album, they were pissed. Izzy in particular said he hated it and had no idea it was even being included. It was another sign that this wasn't a democracy anymore, that it was starting to become the Axl Rose show. Around the same time, Axl also canned their longtime manager, Alan Niven, the guy who had guided them from the clubs to the stadiums, and replaced him with Doug Goldstein, a former security guy. Slash felt this was a disaster, and the Goldstein just played Axl against the rest of the band, further deepening the divides. And then there was the tour. They started the Use Your Illusion tour in January 1991, full 8 months before the albums even came out. That's how delayed the record was. The tour was scheduled, so they just went. The first shows were at the Rock in Rio Festival in Brazil. Right before they went on stage for the first time with the new lineup, Axl allegedly made the other members sign legal documents that gave him the exclusive rights to the Guns N' Roses name. If they didn't sign, he wasn't going on. The tour itself became stuff of legend, and not for good reasons. It lasted 28 months, 192 shows across 27 countries. It was the longest and most expensive tour in rock history at that point. Axl's late starts became infamous. The band would often not hit the stage until after midnight, leading to fines and angry promoters. They were burning through money so fast with fines and lawsuits and insane production costs that they reportedly didn't actually turn a profit until the final year of the tour. The first major explosion happened in St. Louis in July of '91. During the show, Axl spotted somebody in the crowd with a video camera. He pointed him out to security, but when they didn't move fast enough, Axl just took the matters into his own hands, dove headfirst into the audience to confiscate the camera himself. After being pulled back on stage by the crew, he grabbed the mic and said, "Well, thanks to the lame-ass security, I'm going home." Boom. Mic drop moment for Axl. He walked off. The crowd, which had been waiting for hours, went berserk. Full-blown riot erupted, causing millions of damages and injuring dozens of people. Axl was charged with inciting a riot, and the band's response was to put a "fuck you St. Louis" message in the thank you section of the album liner notes. This was the environment Izzy Stradlin, now clean and sober, found himself in. He could not take it anymore. The drugs, the egos, musical bloat, Axl's megalomania, as he called it. He started traveling separately from the band, riding his motorcycle between gigs. His last official show was in August '91 at Wembley Stadium. A few months later, right after the albums were finally released, he officially was out. He quit. Solo of the band was gone. So they replaced Izzy with Gilby Clarke, and the Chaos Machine just keeps on rolling. In August of '92, they were on a co-headlining stadium tour with Metallica. During Metallica's set in Montreal, their frontman James Hetfield was badly burned by a pyrotechnics mishap, so they had to cut their show short. Guns N' Roses was supposed to go on, but they took hours to get to the stage. When they finally did, Axl, complaining about vocal problems and bad sound, walked off after just a few songs. Another riot ensued. The city of Montreal was torn apart by angry fans. The songs on the albums themselves were a map of Axl's psyche. Estranged, another 9-minute epic, was written after his marriage to Erin Everly was annulled. Get in the Ring was a direct, profanity-laced attack on specific music journalists and magazines that had written negative things about the band. He literally called them out by name and challenged one editor to a fistfight. Then he got Double Talk and Jive. Great track. The song Izzy wrote had this creepy spoken word part by Axl where he talks about finding a head, an arm, and a garbage can, which is supposedly based on a real event near the recording studio. When the albums were finally released on September 17, 1991, the commercial success was staggering. Use Your Illusion 2 debuted at number 1 on the Billboard charts. Use Your Illusion 1 debuted at number 2. No artist had ever done that before. They sold a combined 14 million copies in the US alone. November Rain became the longest song ever to hit the Billboard Top 10, and its ridiculously over-the-top, expensive music video became an MTV staple. The albums were praised for ambition, musical diversity, but also criticized for being so big and bloated and self-indulgent, full of all sorts of different stuff. For every masterpiece like Estranged or Civil War, there's a track like My World. There's the sound of a band with unlimited resources and no editor. A band at the absolute peak of its fame and creative powers, but also at the beginning of its spectacular collapse. The tour finally ends in July of '93, and the band was in shambles. The original lineup that had conquered the world was completely fractured. Slash would hang on for a few more years before finally quitting, unable to work with Axl any longer. Looking back, he said losing Steven Adler was the beginning of the end. The Use Your Illusion era was a monument to rock and roll excess. Chaotic, brilliant, and ultimately tragic story of how a band could fly so close to the sun that his wings melted, sending it crashing back down to earth in a blaze of glory and self-destruction.